Well, is capping interest rates at 10% on credit cards a great deal? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon and welcome to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm your host, Bob Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, if you got a question for me, I have an answer for you. Just go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com. There is a link at the top of the page called Ask Prudent Money. Just click through, ask your question. And it goes along with the program. And if I can help you out in that way, take advantage of that benefit for you. So that's all at the website, prudentmoney.com, and that is there for you. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. You know, before we get started today, I wanted to share something with you. And, you know, there's a lot of situations in our lives that we would pray about. We take it to the Lord in prayer, and we just get it off our chest. We just talk it out. We pray about it. And, pray for guidance, pray for where God wants to see this revolve and get to. And then things happen. Crisis happens maybe, or things just get out of control. And we get mad about it, or we get upset about it. And it dawned on me as I was thinking about this today that we can't get upset when we gave that luxury of getting upset away, when we gave it to God. And God put everything into motion and said, you know what, let's start to answer these prayers. And it may be something that you don't like, but you asked for it. And it's something probably that you had to go through, or that you need to understand, or you get a better understanding of. And I just want to stress to you to pay attention to that, your reactions to things that happen in your life when they don't go maybe the way that you think they should go, but they're going the way you prayed to God to guide you and to guide the circumstances, to guide the environment. It's just something to think about. Okay, wanted to share that with you. Now, let's talk a little bit about crazy weekend. No, I'm not talking about NFL football, even though it was pretty crazy. If you watched it, if you're a football fan, it was a great time to be a football fan because of everything that the games were great. Everything came down to the last minute and lots of fun. But I'm talking about the news flow that came out over the weekend. And I got to tell you that I would consider myself a Fed watcher, Federal Reserve Board, stay on top of what they're saying, stay on top of what they're doing. And then as of November last year, when President Trump got elected, I would pay attention to what he said. And what I do is I save articles. The news flow coming out of the White House is so abundant, is I guess the way to put it. It's hard to keep up with. But here's one that came out over the weekend, and I wanted to read this to you because when I first heard it, I thought to myself, hey, this is a pretty good idea. Then I read WalletHub's their analysis of this idea of capping credit card interest rates at 10%. So basically, what President Trump wants to do is he wants to take, let's say you've got, 5 credit cards. They're all over the interest rate of 10%. One's 15, one's 20, one's 25, one's 27, whatever. He wants to say, okay, for a year, I want to cap those rates out at 10%, and credit card companies cannot charge any more than 10% for a whole year. Now, when I first thought about this, I thought that's not a bad idea. I'd love to see him pull that off. And then, like I said, I read WalletHub's their reply to this idea, I wanted to read it to you because I want to make sure that you have both sides of the story. Because obviously, the headline idea of capping interest rates is a pretty good idea. But the CEO of Wallet Hub says capping credit card interest rates at 10% is a horrible idea. People who currently have credit card debt will get some short term relief, but the move will inevitably block millions of people whose credit history does not merit a 10% APR from ascending credit at all. Now, what he's saying there, he's saying that the credit card companies are going to come back and they're going to say, okay, fine, if you want to cap it at 10% for a period of time, then we're going to look at risk differently. We're going to look at how we issue credit cards. Now, one thing that they can do, if you have so many credit card offers that are 0% for the first, so capping credit cards is the interest rate at 10%. Not a big deal from that standpoint. What it's a big deal though is if you don't have the credit score to warrant a 10% credit card rate. And so what I think they would end up doing is they would offer some kind of 0%. And then at the end of, just kind of like they're doing right now, at the end of 0%, whether it's 12 months, 18 months, they'll raise the interest rates to, let's say, 20, 25%. And they've done what they said they would do on new credit. On old credit, sure, if you've got credit cards, you're probably not using them anyway, or you're paying them off. Hopefully you're not. But I take that back. There's a lot of people probably still using credit cards, available credit, that type of thing. So they're going to look at everything from the lens of your credit worthiness being 10%. And I think that was what he was talking about. It says millions of people will have to deal with reduced credit limits, account closures, shorter 0% promotional periods, and annual fee increases as a result. It's like if the government tried to set car insurance rates, millions of people would be without coverage. If you already have credit card debt and you're not planning to incur more, there's not much for you to do other than sit back, relax, and enjoy this one-time interest rate discount. If you'll need to access credit card debt in the coming months, you might want to do so proactively now, since you might lose the ability later on. Credit improvement is more important than ever, as not having a good or excellent credit score could shut you out from the credit card game under this new proposed rule. Finally, it's worth noting that if you own stock in a credit card company and you think this 10% rate cap is a long-term policy, you might want to reconsider your position. Shares will likely be under a lot of pressure in the short term. I don't believe this policy will last, however. Now, I'll tell you this. This was back right before President Obama was elected into office. The politicians were catching a lot of flack for the abuse from the credit card companies, consumer credit card abuse. And so they came out with this act called the Fair Debt Act. And, basically, I wrote about this I read the legislation, I read the documents to it. Yes, I have that kind of free time. And, and so I read all of it, and I wrote about it in my book, A Deceptive Money, back in 2009. And it was set to where President Obama, in May of 2009, was going to sign the bill, and he did. The Fair Debt Act, I think it was called. And now credit card companies had like 12 months or 18 months or something like that to close credit lines, to change up interest rates, basically to trim up their portfolios of debt to where it suits them and makes them the most money, and get ready for all the changes that are going to happen. I tell you that story is because what politicians want to do is they want to set it up to where the we as the voters see that they're doing something about the problem. But what we don't see is the back door that the credit card companies can walk out of and be okay. And that's exactly what they did. I mean, they cut credit limits, they changed up terms and conditions because they in their current contracts that they were being forced to change, they had the ability to do that. So I don't know. I don't think this is anything we can get really too excited about. Now, having said all that, I do think, and we're talking about this last week, that some of the beginning of the year steps that I really encourage you to take is take an inventory of the debt that you have, take an inventory of the interest rates, the payments you're making, because here's the really good thing that people don't realize. Once you've been paying over and over and over and over, month after month after month for years, you lose touch. You probably don't check the balance. You lose touch that in the fact that you're probably almost have an account paid off, or you will by next year. And you need to know that because that gives you a feeling of accomplishment that helps you get through the debt game and get those cards paid off once and for all. So keep that in mind as we head through the beginning of the year here. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later. There's other things I want to cover first. However, we're up against the breaks. This is Bob Brooks. We're up against the breaks. Stick around. I'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. If you got a question for me, I want you to go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. Go to the top of the top link. It says Ask Prudent Money. Click through, ask your question. We'll get it taken care of for you. That's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. I was commenting earlier before the beginning of the program what just an insane news weekend it was. I mean, news that would just kind of stop if you're following it and you're keeping up with what it all means. We talked a little bit about this maybe 2 or 3 months ago, and it's the ongoing feud between President Trump and Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell. And it took a turn for the bizarre. I mean bizarre. I couldn't believe it. So I want to share it with you because I think this is important to stay up with and keep an eye on. But I got to back up to give some of the history. The Federal Reserve Board is in charge of adjusting interest rates up or down. And if we have inflation, they raise interest rates. If we have economic weakness, unemployment weakness, they lower the interest rates. Okay, pretty easy. That's raise interest rates, lower interest rates. Inflation, unemployment is getting rather high. And so you got to be, as a Fed chairman, you got to be really careful with interest rates because it's like a chemistry set. If you get the balance of interest rates wrong, you could really create a problem. So it's important to be judicious about how you make the changes, when and what amount that you make it, and what you communicate. And I personally think that I've been in the business since Alan Greenspan, Bernanke, and I've never seen anything quite like this. So the feud. Now, let me say this too real quick. One of the chief priorities when it comes to the Federal Reserve Board is that they are independent. They don't have to answer to anybody really. They just have to answer to the American people. They have to give, not quarterly, probably semi-annual addresses to Congress to answer questions and tell them what they're doing. And the Federal Reserve Board chairman, Jay Powell, who he is right now, is appointed by the president to serve for a certain period of time. Well, ironically enough, during President Trump's first term as president, he actually appointed Jay Powell. Then we skip a term with Biden, then we're back to President Trump again. And that particular appointment runs out in May, and he'll just be a part of the board of governors. He won't be the acting Fed chair anymore. It'll be a new appointee by Trump. So like I said, the chief priorities is to keep the Federal Reserve Board separate from politics, because you don't want to give that much power to the politicians, and that would be a lot of power, because you can make some big moves with interest rates. You can have unintended consequences. You can create a big boom. There's a lot of things that could happen. So we don't want that in the hands of any politician. Well, that's not what the president thinks. The president thinks that he should have a say in interest rates, and he thinks that Powell, of course, is doing a horrible job because he's not listening, taking his advice. He wants Powell to lower interest rates, which, in my opinion, with all due respect, not a good idea, because if he does that, he's going to, it's like throwing gasoline on a fire, and would not be a good idea. So he's threatened to fire Jay Powell many times. And the way that that appointment is set up, the Federal Reserve Board chairman cannot be fired unless he does something or she does something that is criminally based. Okay, so he has absolutely no control over this, and Jay Powell is not going to do anything criminally based. So this came out yesterday. Still, I'm just amazed at where these quarrels will go. It says federal prosecutors have opened a criminal investigation of Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell over his June testimony before Congress about the central bank's $2.5 billion renovation of its headquarters in Washington, D.C. So, of course, now President Trump denies any dealing with this at all. So the story is that Jerome Powell, Jay Powell, Federal Reserve Board chair, is doing a $2.5 billion renovation on the Federal Reserve Board buildings. And they've got a lot of asbestos, a lot of problems. So it's at the end of the day, what's $2.5 billion when you're talking about monopoly money anyway? But this is what this is all about. The stunning action against the independent Federal Reserve was met with an equally extraordinary statement posted by Powell in a video Sunday night, in which he said the investigation was a direct result from his ongoing struggle with the administration over interest rates. Powell said it was a consequence of broader threats and ongoing pressure by the administration. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public rather than following the preference of the president. Pretty harsh statement. And this says, but the criminal probe takes Trump's fight with the Fed to a whole new level. It shows that whoever Trump selects to replace Powell at a conclusion of his term in May will face continuing pressure from the administration to lower interest rates. Investors and economists agree across the globe and concerned about the Fed's independence. Listen, there is no question, absolutely no question in my mind that this is a dangerous precedent, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on whomever President Trump puts in there, because that pressure probably, if he's going to do this with 4 months left to go before Powell's out of his sight, then he's going to continue. He's starting the new normal, which is taking the independence from the Federal Reserve Board. And this is something that the markets reacted to very negatively at first. They've bounced back, but nobody, and I don't know why this is such a big surprise. I mean, markets should have known this was coming. And Jay Powell has lowered interest rates 3 times, but that's not quite enough. And so the feud begins. So come May, well, actually, let's back up. January, we'll see a nominee to be appointed, and that will be President Trump's nominee. And then we'll see what it looks like afterwards. Nothing surprises me. It does make for, I hope, good radio. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. As we wrap up today, I wanted to just talk a little bit about one aspect of building goals as we talk about this through the month of January, talking about tips, talking about the best ways to do it. It's so very important to be able to be very detailed if asked about your goals and how you're going to accomplish these goals. And when I say goals, these goals, your goals, my goals, our goals, the assumption is that they are your goals in God's will. I think that's obviously a very important. You don't want to be chasing after a goal that God doesn't necessarily think is the right path for you. So we want to keep that in mind. When you're building a vision and you're building a goal that you want to achieve, oftentimes we don't really know the details. It's a process of we sat down with a piece of paper, we wrote it down. Oh, this really sounds nice. I want to make X amount of dollars this year. I want to give X amount of dollars this year. These statements are real nice. This is what I want to achieve. This is why there's no power to them though. This is why we don't ever reach our goals. If you can't say exactly what you want, why you want it, how you're going to get there, and specifically give the details, you're probably not going to get too far down the road before you scrap the idea. It's very important to create passion about this is what I want to set out. This is where I feel God's leading me. This is how I feel God's leading me to do it. This is what I'm going to do. And you look at that, you pray about that, and you work hard towards that. And you've got a passion about it that only can be given by God. Just wanted to share that with you as we talk through the best way to handle a new year. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.